else, is to make the process efficient, easy to use, and above all, transparent. Transparent so that the taxpayers know where their money is going, and for the purposes of today's call, so that you, as our supply base, know what the opportunities are, both in dollar terms and what agencies may be making procurements. As an organization, we're about 204 people strong when we're fully staffed. One of the divisions, there are 8 divisions. The one that I would mention is surplus property. The reason I mention that one is because OCP manages all of the assets that have either reached the end of their depreciable life or just simply no longer needed by an agency. And that presents an opportunity not only to the public, but in particular to our supply base. So, for example, you may be outfitting or refitting your office with computers and desks and chairs. Rather than going to a big box store and spending who knows how much money, it would be worth your while to look at our surplus property site and see if you can buy the same goods for a much lower price. In terms of governing laws, this is not a legal presentation or a presentation on legal, but there's a couple of references down on the bottom of the left slide that you should become familiar with to the extent that you can. Some of the resources that are available to you through OCP are my office, the Office of the Ombudsman. We're here to act as your voice into DC government to help you resolve any grievances that you have, provide training as you need it on a one-on-one basis or in a group session such as this. We have a Center of Excellence, which is available to you when you're trying to register to be a vendor with the district, when you're having some problems with receiving a purchase order or an invoice. Those are the folks that are there to help you. The DC supply schedule, which is a schedule of 12 series of goods and services that are available only to sell through CBEs. And we'll talk more about that as we need to later on. The OCP Transparency Portal, for those of you who are not familiar with it, it is your new best friend in opportunity identification and capture. It's where we post all of the solicitations, where we talk about the awarded contracts, where the money is going in terms of what invoices have we paid, who have we sent purchase orders to, and the like. So that's an important portal for you to take advantage of. In terms of spending, we spent about $11.7 billion last year, and that's a huge number. But I need you to keep in mind that it's influenced by federal funding. It's not all district local money. And that federal funding is to support healthcare programs and agencies like the District Department of Transportation, who are out building roads and bridges. So in the current year, we're looking at, I think it's about it's about $5.4 billion. And the huge drop there from last year is that my understanding is we haven't received confirmation on a lot of the healthcare spending. So that number may increase. But regardless, the message there is that even though we're spending less in FY24, there's still a huge opportunity for you. So let's go to the next slide and talk just briefly about what's the difference between a government solicitation and contract and those in the private sector. And you know, to me, the bottom line is what we have on the bottom of this slide. With a government contract, you're required to maintain certain records and produce them if the government requests them. Both transparency and socioeconomic considerations are heavily considered. So making sure that we're looking after local small businesses, minority and woman-owned businesses, and those types of categories. They provide for maximum competition, which is not to say that the private sector isn't looking for the best competition they can find, but we're spending the public's money and we need to be responsible about that. So we're looking for, we're looking for the best competition that we can find. And there's limited flexibility in negotiation of terms and conditions. On the other side, commercial solicitations or private solicitations are less focused on local, state, and federal statutes and are governed by the Uniform Commercial Code. That takes a lot of the pressure off. And to sort of summarize all of that, in the private sector, adherence to all of the statutes and regulations in the federal government and the state government is not quite as important. And completion of the contract in a reasonable amount of time and at the right price is what they're after. They're looking for contracts that will deliver products and services that ensure a reasonable ROI, a return on investment, for their shareholders. Versus on the government side, we're looking for the best value as well, but we're thinking about how effectively and properly are we spending the public's money. So those are kind of the differences. And with that, we'll jump to the next slide. Okay, we'll talk about some of the roles and responsibilities. The contract officer, it's important for you to keep in mind that that is the only person who is authorized to commit district funds. If I were to call you as the ombudsman and say, on contract such and such, we would like you to do fill in the blank, your response ought to be happy to do that. Have the contract officer give us a call and document what is required. This person also identifies the correct type of procurement, the correct type of solicitation and contract that we'll be using, and ensures that all these laws and regulations are included and followed in the contract. The program office, so the agency, they're the folks that write the statement of work, or SOW. It details what the goods and services are that are required, what the specifications are. It's their job to get to ensure that funding has been approved before any commitments are made to you or supply base. And they also assign resources or subject matter experts to participate in the technical evaluations of the proposals that you send. Back on the OCP side, the contract specialist is a key person in the whole program. This is an OCP employee who manages the day-to-day process of the procurement and supports the contract officer by creating and preparing documents for the contract officer, sort of the eyes and ears to make sure that the contract officer hasn't missed anything along the way in the process. Another very important person is the contract administrator. That's a person within the agency that has been delegated a certain level of responsibility by the contract officer. This person cannot commit funds. So just as I said in the example of me as ombudsman calling you and saying, in contract such and such, we'd like you to do fill in the blank. The same response should come if the contract administrator asks you to do something that is outside of the statement of work that you agreed to. And, the reason for that is you'll eventually get paid, but it's going to slow the process down, and it could slow the project down without a reasonable explanation for why. This person will be from a technical standpoint, your day-to-day contact. So if there's technical issues or questions, that's the person you would turn to post-contract award. Conversely, the contract specialist is the person you would talk to about procurement-related issues. That's kind of boiling the ocean down of what these four categories of people do, but it should give you a reasonable sense of what their roles and responsibilities are. So with that, let's see if we can move on to the next slide. And start talking about some of the terms that Keith was mentioning. What in the world is a non-responsible bid or proposal? I've given you a little paragraph on each of these, but the bottom line is non-responsive means that you didn't answer the questions that were in the solicitation, or you answered them so poorly that the contract officer and the agency couldn't figure out what you were trying to say. Or, if it's an open market solicitation, excuse me, if it's a set-aside solicitation and you're not a CBE, well, thank you for your proposal, but this is a set-aside, so that could make you non-responsive. A non-responsible bid, at the end of the day, is when the contract officer and the technical evaluation team within the agency read it and discover there's something wrong with the information that's being presented here, or based on experience and judgment from the contract officer and the agency staff or the technical evaluation committee, they intuitively know that whatever you're promising in the bid or the proposal realistically can't be delivered, so it becomes non-responsive, non-responsible. In those two situations, once you receive notification of non-responsiveness or non-responsibility, it's really difficult to get back into the game on that particular solicitation. And so perhaps it's worth making a call to the contract specialist or the contract officer to say, hey, can we talk about this? But it may be a better use of your time to use it as a learning experience, and post-contract award, to whoever it goes to, ask for a debrief to find out, gee, where did I go wrong? And use it as a learning experience. In terms of what is an invitation for bid, excuse me while I take a little sip here. This is the procurement method that's used when the requirements for the services and goods are clearly defined. The district knows what it wants, has a pretty good idea of what they're willing to spend, and negotiations are not necessary. In an invitation to bid, the deciding or awarding factor typically comes down to who has the best price and the best value. So there's not a whole lot of negotiation that needs to take place. The set aside, as we talked briefly about a couple of minutes ago, is where the district has set aside certain procurements so that only local small businesses, certified business enterprises, and district-based small business enterprises are the only folks that can participate in the solicitation and submit a bid. It's really that simple. In other states, it expands itself to including minority and woman-owned businesses only. So that's what a set-aside is. An open market solicitation is where anybody in the whole world can submit a bid, again, to a particular solicitation. We do encourage the CBEs participate in those open market solicitations because, we have the two categories, set aside and open market, but we don't want a situation where the CBE feels, well, geez, I can't participate in that because it's open market. Well, you most certainly can. In terms of an IDIQ, which I think Keith mentioned, indefinite delivery and indefinite quantity, the bottom line is the district knows what it wants to buy, but it hasn't the first clue of how much of it wants to buy or when they're going to need whatever the goods or services are. But there's a contract called an IDIQ that's put in place so that when the time comes, we can issue a requisition and a purchase order to you. There's no guarantee that the district is going to purchase anything if you have an IDIQ contract. But if the decision is made, at least the terms and conditions are in place and the pricing is in place. So I'll stop there for a sec and let people put whatever questions they have in the chat box, and then we'll move to the next slide. I know I'm going through some of this relatively quickly, but I want to make sure that we leave time at the end of the presentation for you to ask us your questions beyond what we're able to give you in these little paragraphs or sound bites.
Hey, Pete.
Yes.
You had made mention of women-owned and minority-owned businesses, and
yes.
so I just want to make sure we're crystal clear on the CBE program is race and gender neutral, right? So we're focused on small and local. So I guess the question would be for clarity is if that contract is out there, let's say they're in the transparency portal, right, which is one of your tools over at OCP, and they see set aside, should they automatically think small and local? Because the women owned and minority owned should be on our federal partners, correct?
That's absolutely right. Very well said. And but I also want to say at the risk of confusing things, that doesn't mean that a minority or woman-owned business can't submit a bid or a solicitation. It's just the
Correct.
intention is that they be local.
Correct.
We do have two questions, Pete. Someone asked, can you provide information on how to apply for IDIQs? They said they find that it's difficult to get information on this in a succinct manner.
You're breaking up a little on my side, so I'm not exactly sure what the question is.
Sorry, I'll repeat. Somebody asked, can you provide information on how to apply for IDIQs? They found that it was difficult to get information on that topic in a succinct manner.
Okay. I think the best answer I can give to that, because I don't know the particular situation, is when there is confusion or you're just not getting the information that you need, call the Office of the Ombudsman and we'll get the information for you. I think that's the best answer I can give you. It should not be a difficult process. Easy for me to say because I'm on this side of the table, but that's part of why my office is here. To take the ambiguity out of things, to take the non-responsiveness to your questions out of things. And go ahead.
Yep, I think they just asked for an email. Pete, are you able to put your email, or should we put the general ombudsman email?
So you're going to put the email in the chat? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Use the ombudsman email, Aziza. Hey, Pete, the other thing in support to what you were saying was, again, if you use, I think this is Justine's question, if you use the OCP transparency portal, there's a field that says contract type in it. And so it'll say it's an IDIQ. You can't filter down to what type of contract it is. But if you're looking at something specific, I can tell you there's certain industries where all I see is IDIQ. So to Pete's point, it easy for us to say because we're living it every day. But if you're in that transparency portal, there is a field for contract type, and it would say it right next. It would say IDIQ or firm fixed contract, whatever whatever type it is. So
Good point. Very good. Okay, if we're ready, we can move on to the next slide.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so the statement of work, SOW. We talked about this in a sentence or two a little while back, but it's the portion of the contract of the solicitation that describes what it is that the district wants to buy. What are the specifications? What are the deliverables? Here's some information about the agency that's making the procurement. What are all of the requirements? And it is written by the agency, which I think we said a little bit earlier. Quite frequently, the agency will rely on external subject matter experts to get input, and at the same time, do it in such a way that the statement of work is not unintentionally written to preclude other people. It's just they're reaching out to subject matter experts to get that much more information and to provide that much more clarity in the statement of work. Unauthorized commitments kind of goes back to the comments about the contract officer. And an unauthorized commitment is when Pete, the ombudsman, calls you and says, on contract number 123, we want you to move all of the tractor trailers from parking lot A to parking lot C and send us a bill when you're done. That's a big no-no. It has to come from the contract officer. Or it could be, we want to change the quantity on a purchase order that we've already given to you. Please go ahead and do that. It's considered an unauthorized commitment. It wasn't made by the contract officer. And to really drive it home, you may be tempted to say, sure, we'll do whatever that is that you want done. But in the absence of confirmation from the contract officer, and frankly, a change order to the purchase order or statement of work, you just might not get paid for having done that work. So be very careful about that. There are multiple year contracts, there are single year contracts, and there are contracts that have option years. Simply put, the base year in a contract with the DC government is the first year of the contract. The option years are what those of us who have been in the private sector think of as purchase periods. So the base year ends, the district has the option to extend the contract as it was written with the pricing that's already there for a second year or a option period. Frequently, there is a base year and 4 years that follow on, and they're all called option years. And it's totally the district's decision if they want to if they want to go to another purchase period. Okay, let's jump to the next slide. A ratification package. That goes back to somebody on the CVE side agreed to do something that was not approved by the contract officer, or they didn't get a purchase order. This is the process that we go through. To the ratification process is what we go through to make sure that you get paid. And it's nothing saying that you're going to. It depends on the circumstances. The ratification package is completed by the contract administrator. It's reviewed by the contract officer and the contract specialist. And then it goes to our legal folks at the general counsel's office here in OCP for review and signed off by the chief procurement officer. That process can take 30 days or more. So it's important that you understand that although there's a risk that you won't get paid for performing on an unauthorized commitment, again, it didn't come from the contract officer, that there is a process to try to help protect you and get you paid. And that's what it's called, a ratification package. Requests for proposals. They're used in competitive sealed bids, typically greater than $100,000. And we'll talk about procurements that are less than that later on. The request for proposal is seeking information. It's not necessarily a commitment to buy anything or to bind the district to anything. We're out looking for information to find out what is your proposal to solve whatever the problem is that we have, or to provide whatever the goods are that we're looking for. The request for quotation is much the same. We're simply looking for information, and we're looking for your quote. Your quote for whatever it is that the district wishes to buy, and eventually that would be followed up by an invitation to bid. So those two documents are important. They're used in procurements typically greater than $100,000 in a year, but they're seeking information. They're not necessarily something that you send a formal proposal that you're going to be held to and enter into a negotiation with. You've probably heard of PASS, or you will if you haven't. It is the Procurement Automated Support System, and at the end of the day, it's the system that OCP uses to issue purchase orders, to advertise solicitations, to receive your invoices, to pay your invoices, and those types of activities. anything that is related to pass, the first order or first stop, if you need information, is that center of excellence that we talked about earlier. You can always reach out to the Office of the Ombudsman. But that's simply what pass is. It's our procurement, it's our automated procurement system. With the requisition, we all probably know that, but just to be on the safe side, it's the document that's completed by the contract administrator, letting the contract specialist and contract officer know that we want to buy whatever it is that's in the contract, and this is how much of it we want to buy, that we have funding secured for this, and any additional requirements or justifications that might be necessary to satisfy the pass system, like who's the vendor, where are they located, that type of information. Cooperative contracts. I know that cooperative contracts tend to be a bit of a problem for our CVEs, in that a cooperative contract is a contract that is established by a single state, and they invite other states, including DC, to participate in that contract. And the reason they do that is so that if you combine the requirements and needs of several states, they're more likely to get better pricing, meaning the district is likely to get better pricing and better terms and conditions. The rub is these cooperative contracts don't necessarily consider local requirements within the state. For example, anything under $250,000 is supposed to go to a CVE. Doesn't consider that. And so that creates a little bit of agita for CVEs, or it certainly would for me if I were a CVE in the district. It's really, hey, wait a minute, it's not fair. How do I compete against something like that? So the bottom line to this is there is no reason that a CVE can't participate as a reseller or an aggregator, or whatever word you like better, in those contracts. So my suggestion is, if you see that there is a cooperative contract, and I think there's only a half a dozen that the district uses, but nevertheless, if you see that there's a cooperative contract that the district is participating in, reach out to the Ombudsman's office, and we'll put you in touch with the folks that can help you participate as a reseller or an aggregator, or again, whatever word it is that you like. So there is opportunity there. I can't promise that in every case, the lead vendor is going to say, yay, verily, let's bring this DC company on. But shame on us as a CVE group and as an ombudsman's office if we don't at least reach out and try. I think my primary message here on these contracts are, yeah, it's a little bit of a rub, but this ombudsman sees where there's opportunity, and we just have to dig at that opportunity together a little bit. So with that, let's move on to the next slide. This slide, as it turns out in your package, is a repeat, and I will get a revised slide out to you after Aziza, gives you what we're looking at today. But what is conspicuously absent on this particular slide, and I didn't frankly think about it until last night, healthcare contracts. There's a difference between healthcare contracts and your, kind of run-of-the-mill contract or solicitation. And the two general types of healthcare contracts that are out there, and I know there's somebody from the healthcare community on this call because I saw it in the attendee list. So feel free to chime in and keep me straight on this. But there's two types of contracts. There's a healthcare contract that is a fee for services. So the district agrees to pay a certain amount of money for a certain set of services. And that could run the gamut from services from blood testing to placement of people to management of a patient's care. And then there are performance-based and incentive healthcare contracts. So the contract talks about, well, this is the minimum performance that we'll be looking for from you to get paid. Oh, by the way, if you exceed these expectations and they're documented in the contract, there's extra money for you. So they're incentive contracts. I'll be honest, I don't know a whole lot about them, and that's why I invited whoever it is that's on the line for the healthcare community to chime in on this. But they're a different animal from the run-of-the-mill contract. So we'll see if anybody wants to chime in, and then it's fine if nobody does. But I wanted to make sure that we got that information out there about healthcare contracts, because they are a different animal. Excuse me, just quickly, the life cycle, if you will, or the contract flow. It begins in the agency with a requirements document, the SOW, statement of works, planning the procurement, which involves the agency, the contract administrator, the contract officer, the contract specialist. We then develop a solicitation, which is sent out, it's evaluated. And I'm going through this quickly on purpose because this isn't really why you were on the call, but I felt it was important to put the process in here. Finally, there's an award made, and then there's contract administration. No rocket science here, and nothing that you probably couldn't figure out on your own, but sometimes the picture is worth 1,000 words. So with that, let's jump to the next slide and just make a couple of clarifications about contracting thresholds and when they're used. For procurements that are $100,000 or less, there are micro purchases that we can use, that we, the district, we as district employees can use. And that's where a procurement card has been issued to certain people within each agency. Sometimes it's referred to as micro purchasing. These are used for procurements up to $2,500 a day for services and up to $5,000 a day for goods. And they're out there because it's small money compared to the overall, to the overall spend. But it's important to you as CBEs, particularly if you're in a service industry or if you own, if you will, the hardware store down on the corner. Because if somebody in the Department of Public Works needs a wrench, they don't have time to go through a formal process, and it's a small amount of money. So it would behoove you to make sure you accept the district's procurement guide. Oh, by the way, you get paid nearly overnight when you use that. Purchases cannot exceed $2,500 per day for services, or $5,000 a day for goods, or a total of $20,000 a month. So I think that's important information for you to know. And if you go to the ocp.dc.gov website, you can learn more about the procurement guide. But it's important for you guys to know that tool is out there. It's a tool for us, but frankly, it's a tool for you as well to be able to capture some of that low-hanging fruit that's out there. In terms of what's competitive and not competitive, procurements of $10,000 or less can be made without competitive quotations. That doesn't mean that the contract officer or contract specialist won't call a couple of people to see if they're getting the right price or they're getting the best price. But it does mean that it can be done without competitive quotes. So if there's something that's needed in a hurry, maybe not this afternoon because somebody doesn't need a wrench, or somebody doesn't need an instructor tomorrow afternoon, or a marketing person the day after, but pretty quick. And procurements that are over $10,000 but less than $100,000 require 3 written quotes. The contract officer can make a business decision to get more quotes or less quotes, but they have to justify that to the chief procurement officer. So it's a little bit about $100,000 and below. There's a lot of those types of procurements, so be on the watch for those. Above $100,000, as I think we mentioned a little bit earlier, we use requests for proposals, which we already talked about, and an invitation for bid, an IFB. So just kind of bringing it back to some of the terminology that was used earlier on. And the following slide. Terrific. Real simple. Invitations for bids, the 14-day window to respond. Important to note, depending on changing business conditions, the contract officer can justify it, documenting it to make it 7 days. And it's one of the reasons that Keith and Aziza and I tell everybody, look at the solicitations page frequently. Things can change, business conditions can change. And when the agency and the contract officer thought, hey, we've got a couple of weeks to worry about this, or even longer, something happened, and we need to reduce the amount of time. Requests for proposals, there are 21 days to respond to those. And again, the contract officer, in consultation with the agency, depending on changed conditions or circumstances, can reduce that. So, I'm going to repeat myself. I'm pretty good at that at my age. Keep looking at the solicitations page to see if things change, because it would be a heck of a note if you saw something on Monday and thought, hey, I've got 21 days to respond to this. And then you went back the following Tuesday and found out, oh, good grief, they reduced it to 14 days and I just missed my opportunity. They're all on the OCP website on the solicitations tab. And then just a little note down here. I don't know who reads the newspaper anymore with all of the electronic media that's out there, but a procurement greater than $250,000 will be put in a local newspaper for general circulation. Just good information for you to have. I think the takeaway on this slide is now you know legally how long an invitation for bid is out there. And, it could be longer, but it'll say it in the solicitation. And more importantly, that hey, those timeframes can change. So stay on top of that so you don't miss any opportunity. And with that, I think if we go to the next slide, we're ready to entertain any questions that you have.
There were some questions in the chat while you're speaking, so we'll start with those if people are going to put questions in, additional questions. The last question was, somebody said another problem I noticed, this is regarding IDIQs, I believe. I noticed is almost always the same companies getting jobs, small companies, they don't have chance. And I guess they're not getting any response. So I think we believe, sorry about that, we put the ombudsman office. So I believe this question was from district contractors. You can reach out to the OCP ombudsman office for your assistance with that. For IDIQs, how do you provide the cost when there are so many variables? And as the acronym suggests, it is indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity. I guess I'm confused about the RFP. RFP requires that info in the bid proposal and awards the bid to the lowest bid. Could you clarify?
Yeah, the problem, maybe if I can look in the chat, the problem that I'm having is on your mic or whatever, it comes through very noisy like. So I'm not exactly sure what the question is. Let's see if we can find it in the chat.
Let me try it, Pete. Let me try. Can you hear me clear?
Yes.
Okay. So for an IDIQ, how do you provide the cost when there are so many variables? And as the acronym suggests, it is indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity. I guess I'm confused when the RFP requires that info in the bid proposal and awards the bid to the lowest bid. Could you clarify?
I think it's a great question, and it's gone through my mind in the past. If you don't mind me speaking freely, it's a little bit of the roll of the dice. You have to decide what can you afford to live with, where can you still make your margin with the best price, and how does that compare to the thoroughness of the solution that you're providing? That's kind of a weak answer, but it's just a risk that you have to take. And one of the ways that you can manage that is to go into the OCP transparency portal and take a look at contracts that have already been awarded for those type of products. And if you have to, and you have time, submit a FOIA to find out what prices have been quoted in the past. Or find out who those types of contracts have been awarded to. And again, with the transparency portal, take a look at what purchase orders have been issued for those products, that are similar to what you're going to bid on, and look at the invoice to see what did the district actually pay. It's a couple of data points that you can use, but quite honestly, and again, to speak quite candidly, it's a roll of the dice. You've got to figure out what you can live with.
And Pete, just to add on to that, just remember the spirit of an IDIQ is it's really a license to fish, right? So you're really bidding on, the intent to do business with the government, knowing that the government may or may not ever call you, right? I do technical assistance all the time with folks who have an IDIQ for $1 million. They didn't get a call for 5 years. So act accordingly. Go ahead, Aziza, next question.
Yes, so somebody said, I received a request to submit an independent government estimate for an agency. I followed up with the agency a few times to get feedback on the IGE and haven't received a response since November. Any recommendation on how to address this?
If somebody asked you as a supplier to provide a government estimate of what something should cost, did I get that right?
Yes, they received a request to submit an independent government estimate.
I'm not a good poker player. I'm sure my face is showing it, but I don't know why in the world somebody would reach out to the CBE. And I'm not being disrespectful to anybody, but why in the world anybody would reach out to a CBE for a government estimate? Because that's our job on this side of the fence. That's what the contract administrator and the contract specialist are for. If you haven't received any feedback, my guess is that somebody realized, well, maybe I shouldn't have done that, and that's not a good a good excuse or reason. But I'm just a little bit lost for words about why somebody would ask you guys for that. And I think you did the right thing by providing whatever you did. But I wouldn't anticipate receiving something back. Keith, if you had any experience in that regard?
No, my reaction was yours.
Okay. And we made that quite respectfully to whoever submitted the question. You did the absolutely right thing by responding. And we did the absolutely wrong thing by not getting back to you and saying, well, we really didn't mean it when we asked, or something.
All right, and then next person asked, before we bid, do we have to be on the DCSS?
That's a great question. If it's a set aside procurement, chances are you do need to be on the DC supply schedule. Typically, if a solicitation is being issued through the DC supply schedule, it will tell you that. But either way, if you're a CBE, and you can possibly do it, get on the supply schedule for whatever the commodity or services is that you sell. It's to your best advantage. At the end of the day, no, you don't have to be registered on the DC supply schedule to bid unless it's a set aside, which again means it's for CBEs.
Perfect. Before I move on to the next question, I do see some hands up. Please put your questions in the chat and I will read them to get the answer. Next question is, how can a CBE that's an MRO reseller effectively navigate the procurement process to compete for task orders under existing contracts? And what strategies or programs does DSLBD offer to support CBEs and enhancing their competitiveness in this area? Additionally, how can the DC Ombudsman assist CBEs in addressing challenges they may face when competing for task orders?
I'm not sure if that's a question for me or a question for Keith.
thing is twofold. Keith, do you want to do the part about DSLBD first?
Okay,
Your
well,
mic is
Can you
muted,
show,
Pete.
can you show it again? Can you show
Yes,
it
it
again?
says, the first part is, how can a CBE that's an MRO reseller effectively navigate the procurement process to compete for task orders under the existing contracts? And what strategies or programs does the DSLBD offer to support CBEs in enhancing their competitiveness in this area?
Okay, so the short answer, Ahmed, is I would reach out to the Business Opportunities Division and schedule some time for technical assistance so we can hone in specifically on your transaction and what your needs are. I can tell you I would probably start with the OCP transparency portal and work my way. But just reach out to us and let's get a good 30 minutes with you.
I think you're spot on, Keith. The only thing that I might add is Keith Aziza and I preach this all the time. Reach out directly to the agencies. If you see opportunities, send them a short email telling them that, you know, you recognize they have this need, either it was on the forecast or is in the green book, or you just know intuitively because you're a subject matter expert, sooner or later, given what the projects are you're working on, agency, you're going to need this, and start marketing to them, not by sending them formal proposals, but 3 or 4 line emails sent on a regular basis to let the agency know that you're out there, that you have what they need.
Perfect. And I think the last part of the question was a little different. It says, additionally, how can the DC Ombudsman assist CBEs in addressing challenges they may face when competing for task orders?
I'm not quite catching what you're saying.
Sorry, I'll say it louder. It says, the last part said, additionally, how can the DC Ombudsman assist CBEs in addressing challenges they may face when competing for task orders?
When you're in a competitive situation, the only way that the ombudsman's office can help is if you suspect you're not being treated fairly. We can't give guidance on how to formulate your pricing or your proposal, because then we're getting involved in something that we're not supposed to be involved in. But if you're trying to get information to help you finish your pricing and your proposal, then we can get involved and call somebody and say, hey, look, you got to get back to this person and answer their question and kind of bird dog them to make sure that they do.
Thank you, Pete. Next question, somebody asked, are there any opportunities for solicitations for real estate services?
So what type of services?
Real estate.
Real estate. I probably
real estate.
real
Okay.
estate. Yeah.
You know, it's not you. It's either my computer or my lack of being able to hear correctly. There are opportunities in the real estate area, and you can find those in the OCP portal in the solicitations and the forecast. And I think it's just a matter of you're noodling through, you, the CBE, noodling through who are the agencies that would be interested in that. And a couple that come to mind for me are the Department of Housing, the Department of General Services, DGS. Those types of opportunities are out there. And I talk about DGS because they're the folks that manage and help procure all of the buildings and facilities that the district owns or rents. That would be a perfect audience for you.
Great. And then next question says, does your office look into trends regarding who actually gets task orders once an IDIQ is awarded?
You know, my office has done that a couple of times just in the interest of finding out are we being fair about the way that we give the business out, or award the business, I should say. We're not giving it out as we award the business. But in general terms, no. That said, if a CBE suspects that, there's something wrong here. I've bid on 20 different projects and there's only two guys that ever get the business. That's something that you might want to call the ombudsman's office about, and we can take a look at that.
Okay, perfect. And then Megan Bailiff asked, we have been asking to get our trade listed on the supply schedule since all agencies buy our services, pavement marking, and it can be bought at credit card level, small bid size to larger projects, no success so far. And that was a follow-up to what if your trade is not ever on the DC supply schedule?
All right, so this company is trying to get on the supply schedule and they haven't been successful.
No, so I guess the trade that they offer isn't listed on there.
Okay. I don't think there's a lot that you can do about that, but let's take that another step further. In the supply schedule, I think there is a building supplies or cleaning supplies related schedule. So if you sell the stuff that a cleaning company would use to clean the building, clean a building, then there's a supply schedule for you. If not, if you're the person who does the cleaning, then the Department of General Services is where you want to target your marketing, and it's their forecast and solicitations that you want to look at.
Okay. Next person asked, is there a directory to find the contact info for agency contract officers specialists?
Yes, there is. And I think in what you're going to receive from Aziza, some of that is listed. And I promise that I will send Aziza later on today, if she doesn't have it, the listing of who the chief contract officers are by cluster within OCP. And by cluster meaning a cluster is all of the agencies that are involved in healthcare, all of the agencies that are involved in citywide protection like the police and the fire, et cetera, et cetera. So we can provide that information to you, and it will have their name, their email address, and a phone number.
Perfect. And I will make sure I'll send that out to everybody on this training. The next question from Brandon says, I know MCCBEs are new and have limited procurement opportunities. Are there contracts specifically for MCCBEs as of now? If not, are there plans to create them? How can we be proactive in advocating for procurement contracts for MCCBEs and make our presence known to suppliers in DC who we are allowed to engage in business with?
Okay, somebody has to tell me what an NCCBE is.
Are you familiar with that acronym, Keith? I'm not too familiar with that.
I'm going to assume medical cannabis.
Okay.
That's an assumption.
Brandon, can you let me see if they added.
Yep, it is medical cannabis.
Yep, medical cannabis. Yep.
If our assumption is correct about cannabis, et cetera, one of the healthcare related agencies, so maybe I don't know, Department on Disability Services, Healthcare Finance, Department of Human Resources, those types of agencies would be interested in services and goods related to that. A way that you could do that, I think, is to go to the forecast on the OCP transparency portal and hunt around a little bit. And when I say hunt around, what I mean is do a little bit of data mining, find out what are the NIGP codes for the related goods and services, put those in the search query, and that will bring up agencies that have expressed an interest or expressed that they may be buying something in that regard over the next however many months.
Perfect. And somebody asked, are there any opportunities for construction management
more than you can read about,
Mhm.
is the short answer. And you would find most of those on the DGS, Department of General Services website. Again, they're the folks that maintain all the buildings that the district owns and leases. There's also the Department of Transportation, the District Department of Transportation would be looking for construction management. So for me, those are the two places that I would go. The transparency portal for OCP and the Department of Transportation, the Department of General Services for all the rest of it. And quite honestly, I think the bigger opportunity, I don't know, but I think the bigger opportunity would be with DGS.
Perfect. And Dr. Teresa asked, how are you all making sure new opportunities are given to new CBEs and not repeat folks over and over again?
We have to ask that one again slowly.
Sorry about that. How are you all making sure new opportunities are given to new CBEs and not repeat folks over and over again?
That's a good question. I'm not sure that there's a formal procedure or process for that. Because, as we talked about in the earlier slides, lowest price quite frequently wins in these situations. So no, there's not a formal process for that. But if it's something that you suspect is happening, you can reach out to the Office of the Ombudsman and share your information with us, and we'll look into it. We're not the cure-all to end all, but we can kind of get under the covers a little bit easier than a lot of other folks and find out if there is a nasty trend going on and correct it.
Perfect. And the last question we're going to take is Sheila. So we have a couple of questions before that. Is there a specific template that is used to respond to sealed IFB bids for independent agencies?
Independent agencies. Independent agencies, meaning agencies that are not necessarily supported by the Office of Contracting and Procurement, OCP. I think the answer to that is follow the way the solicitation is written. And if you have questions about it, reach out to whoever the contact person is within the solicitation to position you to respond in the most effective way.
Okay. Next is a follow-up from the medical cannabis question. As a medical cannabis CBE, are we allowed to participate in federal contracts if we are not offering a cannabis-related service?
I'll tell you what, I really can't respond to federal contracts. I think that we'll have to reach out to our friends at Apex Accelerators and get you an answer to that question.
Perfect. And Moses asked, will this PowerPoint be sent out or just a video link? We will be sending out a video link. Are we able to share this PowerPoint, Pete?
Was that directed to me?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I'm really sorry, but I'm having a hard time understanding what you're saying.
No worries.
Are we able to share your PowerPoint presentation with the audience?
Oh, absolutely.
Great.
Very good.
Okay, then yes, so both the video and the PowerPoint will be shared. What is the need for CBE to get on supply schedule?
If you go to ocp.dc.gov and in the search bar, simply type DC supply schedule, it will bring you to a page that tells you all of the things you need to do and how you qualify. And I believe that there is now, test isn't the right word, but there's a document that or a series of questions that you can answer that will tell you whether or not you qualify to be a CBE. Excuse me, to be on the supply schedule.
All right, perfect. So that is the last question. Once again, thank you, Pete and Keith, for coming onto this presentation and answering all these questions. The video and the PowerPoint will be shared later in the week. If Pete or Keith don't have anything to say, we will be ending this presentation now.
Okay, I think the only thing that I want to say is, again, thanks for taking the time to be with us. We know your time is valuable and important. If you have questions now or next week, don't hesitate to reach out to the ombudsman's office and ask those questions. Every question that you possibly could have is a fair question, and we'll give you the honest and straight answer. Keith?
No, I think you nailed it. We appreciate you, Pete. Appreciate the audience listening. Aziza, thanks for your hard work coordinating this, and we'll see you at the next training.
Perfect. And here is the contact information for our team at DSLBD. I will also put the OCP email and the ombudsman email in here for anybody that wants to follow up with OCP. Have a good afternoon, everyone.